Hi, it's Winton Churchill with the Barefoot Consultants, and I'd like to welcome you to our Facebook Friday today. We're going to be talking about a popular topic recently in our private Facebook group that has to do with fraud on online networks. And there's a few simple rules that will help you steer clear of that kind of thing as you begin your trek. Along the path of being an online freelancer. So there's lots of good stuff to talk about around that. So as you're checking in, it'd be great if you could drop your where you're calling in from in the chat window there. Always love to see where people are coming in from. And so we use things like credit cards every day, and it's well known and understood that a certain percentage of our credit card fees go to offset the fraud that occurs. And we all, if you've lived long enough, probably had the occasion when you had fraudulent use of your credit card. And typically that involves calling the credit card company if you catch it right away and having that removed from your bill. And there's a couple rules though to stay safe with that, because if you give your credit card to somebody and give them your secret code and all that kind of stuff, and you use it, your credit card company is going to say, hey, you made the mistake of giving this out, so we're not going to cover that charge. You have to cover it. And the same sort of environment exists in any sort of online activity that you do typically. And online freelance networks, which kind of got their start about 20 plus years ago, 22, 23 years ago, were a real boon to online security, because they kind of built a stone wall around the inside of the freelancing operations. And then the fraudsters and the people like that had a harder time getting in. I remember back when I first started freelancing in 2020, or I'm sorry, 2001, that there were a lot of, stories about people that were freelancing, that had been a freelancer, and they were maybe doing business through PayPal or something like that, but it really didn't have all these protections that the online freelance networks build into their systems. That was one of the early on reasons that freelancers embrace these systems, because from time to time they would have difficulty getting paid. And some freelancers were savvy enough to go ahead and bill their clients in advance. They might have a project that would take, say, 3 months, and at the beginning of the project, they would ask for about a third of the project fee, and then at the middle of the project, they would ask for another third, and then at the end, they would ask for the final third of that. So that kind of worked out okay. But the problem is that many of the freelance buyers that you were working with, they're small business people. Sometimes they get overcommitted on things. They run out of money before they run out a month, and they have trouble making those payments. And so you could get on the short end of the stick. And, of course, as a freelancer, you don't want to create a hassle factor for your client on the payment, because a lot of times it might be going through the accounting department or waiting a signature. So you don't want to pounce on the first day it's overdue necessarily. But one of the things that online networks came along and helped with quite a bit was this whole idea of protecting your information. Every time you give your information out to somebody, whether it's over the internet, over the phone, or in a grocery store or in a restaurant, hand your card to the person in the restaurant, there's a potential for your information to be compromised. We all brush up against this every day, and online there's certainly same thing happens. But one of the principal tenets, and this is the number one thing to know, is that these online networks have created a a wall of safety between you and the people that try to commit fraud. Doesn't mean that it prevents fraud from happening at all, but it prevents a very large part of that, because the idea behind these networks, and I'd like to say hi to Kerr. Thanks for stopping by. In these networks is, you put your personal information in there once, you put your banking information in there once, and then you never give that information to somebody. In fact, that's one of the warning signs that you might be talking to a fraudster, is they're asking you for things like, what's your street address? I want to send you something. They want to know what your social security number is. Sometimes they'll say, and this is when you're working as a freelancer, you might get somebody to say, hey, I'm glad you're working for us. Our company requires that we have the social security number of everybody that works for us. Not true. Not true. That's a fraudster. Hang up immediately. All your tax information, all your banking information is safely secured within these online networks, so that you never have to give that out to somebody. So that's one of the first thing is kind of never leave the walled city in that regard. And that's the source of most of this fraud that occurs. It's somebody who, in a very clever way, entices you to come out of the walled city. They have an excuse. They say something like, we want to hire you. We're glad you're going to be working for us. We like to have you work on our equipment, and so we're going to send you our new equipment. So we're going to send you a check, and you can go out and buy that equipment, and we think it'll cost about $3,000. Well, what freelancer wouldn't be delighted that their client is going to send them $3,000 to go out and buy a new laptop and new printer and all that kind of stuff? And so they send you the check, and you deposit that check. And when the check makes it back to their account, because of the way checks work and are processed, they can see your account number on the back of that check. And, once they have your account number and a few other pieces of information, you become very vulnerable. So, the maxim that if it seems too good to be true, it might be, it very much applies in this case. If you're, if a client that you're working with was going to fund your computer environment, and I have seen it happen online. It does happen rarely, but it does happen. Now the expectation is that you have a computer environment that functions well. But in the old days, there would be different companies and organizations that would want you to work on certain equipment. But this whole idea of having you get involved in going out and buying it is a red flag, because usually those companies would send you exactly the equipment they want you to work with. So this is a very raise red flags right away when somebody's sending you free equipment, especially if they're sending you a check or that kind of thing. You want them to send you the equipment. There is a provision within most of these systems for companies to send you money for expenses. It's not unusual for you to get a job, and from that company, they'll say, we want you to buy, a certain kind of paper to print some things on or something like that. And that might be a $25 expense or $100 expense or whatever it is. And most online networks have a provision for reimbursing your expenses. So that would be, how to pay attention, never leave the campus, never go outside the wall, never give social security numbers, your physical address, all that information is in these systems, and your client does not need that information no matter what they say. And the second point that I want to make on this is that the overwhelming amount of fraud is quickly discovered in these networks. So, in all these networks, you're able to take a look at the profile of the person that is hiring you. And you can look back typically and see other people that they've worked with and other kinds of things that they've done and that kind of thing. And if a freelance buyer has been on that system for a year or two or three and shows a reasonable amount of activity, that's a pretty safe sign that you can do business with that person without worrying about fraud. It's the person that you can see join the network this week. You know, they were not on this network last week. They've now joined the network. They're now hiring freelancers. Usually, as you're getting hired as a freelancer, your clients will give you small jobs to see your skill level, your knowledge level, that kind of thing. And then they will give you increasingly bigger and bigger jobs as they learn to know your capability. They trust you. They know you meet deadlines, all those kinds of things. And at that point, they're more likely to, in some cases, provide equipment to use, or you would incur an expense. Another common place where you might incur an expense is they want you to use a certain tool that they use, and so they have you purchase a subscription to that tool, and you might use it for 2 or 3 months that you're working for them, and they will reimburse you for that, and then they pull that down. But it's the longevity of the buyer. How long has that buyer been on the system? And the overwhelming number of these fraud cases, these folks have been on, the buyers, less than a month, and a lot of times less than a week. So when somebody is saying, hey, we're going to send you all this equipment and we're going to do this stuff for you, and we want to reimburse you, and we've got lots of business coming down the road, you know, take a look at when that person joined the network and be very suspicious if they just recently joined the network. If they have no prior history of jobs is a fairly common telltale sign. So there's a lot of, you know, ways to spot that right away. And it's just, again, the same sort of what they call hygiene that you would use with your credit card. You know, you're not, somebody calls you up on the phone, you're not going to give them your credit card. You know, they say they're from the police association and would you make a donation? And then it turns out that they were not from the police association and you gave them their credit card, and somehow there turned out to be some fraud. So lots of ways to confirm that. And a lot of people don't realize, a lot of new freelancers, that what happens when anybody sees a job of where somebody is suspected of committing fraud or that kind of thing, you can report that person immediately on their profile screen. There's a place to report them. And that's one of the great things about the community of literally millions of freelancers on these systems, as many of them are very skilled at recognizing this. They've seen it before, and so they report that person to the freelance network and say that this information appears fraudulent, that kind of thing. And so, you know, there's just simple things to do. The third thing is really to go a little bit deeper on this personal information thing. Online fraud occurs usually because the person that is defrauded has given the fraudster a piece of information that allowed them to somehow access a profile in which they learned more information about that person and was able to use that to establish credit, take out a loan, set up an account on Amazon or whatever it might be. And this is why it's so important not to share that personal information. And it takes many different forms. And again, if a buyer is new to a system, much more probability that any of these kind of questions are over the line, something you should never respond to, and something you should, in fact, report that person for doing. So, three good thoughts to piece together your online security. Make sure you're not defrauded. Make sure you're part of the freelancer community that reports this kind of thing when you see it, because that protects us all. The challenge is that, in a perfect world, these networks would review every job and do their best to sniff out what might be happening with a particular situation, but they don't. There's millions of transactions that go through these networks every single day, and so you have to rely on the community and people being heads up enough, number one, to play by the rules, follow the rules, not follow not create a scenario where you're giving out your information, um, and report people. And that keeps us all safe on these networks. So if you're ever suspicious of what somebody is asking you to do, or the number one telltale sign is they ask you to start working off the network, or they want to have phone conversations where they want to get your details. This is very popular. You're a new freelancer and they say, yes, we're going to hire you on this $3,000 contract a month. We want to have you do this and that for us, and we're going to have our HR people give you a call just to get some information. And they call up and they say, hi, I'm with this company, and that's a real company, but they have nothing to do with that company. In one case I saw recently, they were just saying, hey, we're with this large company and we're hiring you to work for us, and we just need a few pieces of information. And we need your home address, we need your social security number, what have you. The person was very smooth, sounded like, yes, this is how you do it. This makes sense. I'm going to be in the money. I'm going to be getting $3,000 a month from this one client right away. That sounds good to me. And that's when you want to remind the client that all that information is within the Upwork system or the freelancer.com system, and it's protected there. And, that information will never be divulged to them, and that this is, in fact, a violation of terms of service to solicit that kind of personal information. So very important to have your peepers on, as they say, looking for that kind of thing. And the number one telltale sign is that they're just on the system, because once somebody tries that, 2 or 3 times on a new account, they're immediately flagged as asking inappropriate questions or trying to get inappropriate information, and they're pulled down from the system. But because of the volume of jobs being posted on a daily basis, it's virtually impossible for a human being to review everyone that comes through and understand what's going on with that. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. Happy to take any questions you might have. Let's see. I see Marianne is here from Carefree, Arizona. Welcome. I saw you on our Tuesday night call. So very, very good. And I see a Facebook user from, let's see, Northern Illinois. So welcome. Glad to see you here. The StreamYard system doesn't let your name come through unless you fill out something before you get started, but we're glad you're here, and all the other people that are on the line. So if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to take those. This whole Microsoft thing that we talked about last week, through their LinkedIn subsidiary, over 800 million people have their resumes in LinkedIn, and they have just announced that they're going to put allow those people to freelance through the LinkedIn network. And so this is big news. It's big positive news. It really brings a lot of attention that the second largest tech company in the world is sort of putting their stamp of approval on the idea of freelancing. So this will do a lot of things for us over time, over the next few years, to really bring credibility to this. The one thing to know is that the Microsoft system does not manage your transactions. So somebody can post a job and somebody can say, hey, I'm interested in that job. But pretty much everything after that is sort of a manual communication. It's not like, say, the Upwork system where people turn in proposals and then the buyer can go in and see, 10 or 20 proposals and then go through each one of those and say, yeah, this is what I would, select the freelancer they want to work with. So there will be a while between before Microsoft gets there, although a very capable and powerful company, lots of smart people, they certainly will get there, and they're playing the long game, with 800 million people already registered through LinkedIn in their system. They have a built-in audience for people that want to do freelancing. And certainly the pandemic has really pushed forward the growth of freelancing and the acceptability of freelancing. A lot of companies, government agencies, etc., never thought they could freelance. And they learned during the pandemic that, yes, that's absolutely what they were able to do. And in fact, a lot of studies during the pandemic show that people were much more productive working from home than they were from work. And so we have this thing called the Great Resignation now, where people are going back to the office for the first time in a year and a half or so. And they're working for about 2 or 3 weeks and say, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I like working at home. I like, not having to do that commute. I like not having to get dressed up in my business clothes and run around the office all day and sit in meetings that half of which are by survey. Most managers feel half the meetings that they participate in are completely unnecessary for them. Might be necessary for somebody else, but not for them. And so that's one of the ways that they're more productive in all of that. So just something to think about as we all go back to that. And so with that, I'm going to bring this to a close. Great to see everybody today. Also, we do monitor this after we finish today and through the next week, and we'll answer questions that we see on here. So if you have any questions about anything related to avoiding fraud or that kind of thing, we're happy to answer those on our on the chat or back in a live video like this. So look forward to doing that. So have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Our members will see Tuesday night for our Tuesday night freelance call, and we'll be back here next Friday and look forward to seeing you then. Take care. Adios.